Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
I'm so glad you're joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers, coming to you from Rikers Island. There are so many questions and controversies surrounding the city's notorious jail complex. So we take our cameras inside for an exclusive look and go one-on-one with a new correction commissioner who vows he's up to facing the long-standing challenges.
This facility was one of those facilities where the prior administration was housing by gang affiliation. And it really places our officers at a disadvantage.
Commissioner Louis Molina tells me he brought back tactical weapon searches of housing areas, just one of the practical security measures that were not being done. Another was jail cell doors that did not lock.
So this is the old door,
okay.
And these doors were easily poppable, and so to be unlocked by the detainees, which for our officers prevented a security issue. So what they've done is we've upgraded our housing unit doors.
Other issues will take longer to fix. Deaths in custody continue. A court-appointed federal monitor says violence on Rikers Island is 7 to 8 times higher than in other correctional systems. Commissioner Molina says assaults on officers and staff are starting to decline, but a severe shortage of correction officers remains. When former Mayor Bill de Blasio called for closing Rikers Island by 2027, the focus shifted to the debate and away from improvements.
We believe that the infrastructure of Rikers Island needs to be fixed ASAP today. They can rebuild on Rikers, and it will cost the taxpayers a lot less money than going to these borough-based facilities, which nobody wants in their communities.
There's no question change is needed, but certain pieces need to be in place first, says New York City Council member David Carr.
You have to resolve the staffing issue. That's the most immediate and most easily resolved issue. And you need to make sure that corrections officers are on the blocks, are able to take detainees to and from programming.
Those programs, like the ones we saw at the Peace Center in the RNDC jail, give detainees incentives for good behavior. Legendary hip-hop producer Bimmy Antony runs a music production program.
When I get in the studio and I'm in there, I'm recording with them, or I'm mentoring them, they listening. I tell them I'm see you tomorrow. If I hear something about you, I'm not bringing you back down here. They listen. There
are many different perspectives on this. Let's find out what our panel has to say. Joining me is Benny Basio. He's the president of COBA, that's the Correction Officers Benevolent Association, the Correction Officers Union. Benny, thank you so much for being with us.
Appreciate you having me here with you, Lisa. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Also joining us is Alice Fontier. She's the managing director and an attorney with the Neighborhood Defender Service in Harlem. Alice, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.
We appreciate it. Also with us is David Carr. He's a New York City Council member from Staten Island on the Criminal Justice Committee and been working on this issue in depth. David, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be on the panel.
We appreciate it. And also with us is Bimmy Antony. He's a legendary hip hop music producer, most famous for LL Cool J, among many other artists. And he's also a program coordinator, what you may not know, for Rikers Island detainees, trying to bring programs to the young men who are incarcerated so that they don't get in trouble and so that they have some options and some skills when they get out. Bimmy, thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it. Benny, I want to start with you on this. What do you see right now as the crisis or the current condition of Rikers Island?
I mean, I lived in there, so, I've been there for the last few months, and it's like the blind leading the blind. Nobody knows nothing. Nobody can help. Nobody can, when I talk to the inmates, nobody's like have a reason to means to help anybody. Like even myself, when I ask for certain things, I can't even get it. Like, it's just everybody's crashing. Nobody's leading.
It's like a state of emergency. Benny Basio Jr., the correction officers, you've been speaking out about conditions there for the officers and certain policies that are in place. Is it as bad as everybody thinks it is? Is it better than the summer? Is it, where are we at right now?
We are dealing with inhumane conditions on Rikers Island for officers and inmates alike. This is obviously 8 years of neglect, in my opinion, from the prior administration. They basically decided that they wanted to close Rikers Island. And once that decision was made, they felt, let's just let Rikers Island rot. Let's not keep up with the infrastructure. There's been violences on the rise year after year, steadily assaults on correction officers, assaults on nonviolent inmates. We've had 1,500 correction officers assaulted in the last year. The prior administration was housing inmates by their gang affiliation, putting everyone at risk and kind of empowering and emboldening the inmates by, putting them together by their gangs. They set us up to fail. It's like we've been set up to fail. It's like a recipe for disaster of what we're dealing with. It's truly unfortunate.
And then some of the gang housing policy has changed under the new commissioner, according to what he told us. But Alice, you were there during the summer inside. You got to look inside at the height of this humanitarian crisis that was going on at that intake center. Where do you see things at now?
So what we saw then was horrific. It was an absolute crisis, with many units unstaffed, incarcerated people having to fend for themselves, basic services not being provided. And when I say basic, I mean food, medical, access to hygiene. Very little has changed. It is still a crisis. Our clients report to us on a daily basis that they are still struggling, making repeated sick calls, still struggling to get medical. Court dates are often missed. Violence is rampant, and people are still dying, and dying at a really horrific rate. Last week, 2 people died in 2 days. Both in the new intake center that was meant to clean up the old intake center. The most recent person died because he choked and there was nobody there to assist.
And a lot of this, and a lot of this comes back to all these issues seem to just, really come back to this whole staffing thing. But David, as a city council member, you sit through these meetings, you sit through these hearings, you hear all the testimony. Who's really in charge? Who can really make a difference in terms of making Rikers Island better? Because the mayor appoints the commissioner. There's this federal monitor. There's some state laws that have to deal with safety procedures. I mean, is there a coherent vision for what it's supposed to be?
Well, I think you're right. There's a lot of layers of responsibility here, but for me, the part I focus on is both the administration and the council's role in ensuring secure and safe conditions at Rikers Island. I think we have a twofold crisis that's contributing to the current unchecked epidemic of violence. The first is, as you mentioned, the staffing crisis. We absolutely need more staffing, more corrections officers at Rikers Island, because we've been adding more supportive programming over the years, and that means that the staff is stretched thin when you're transporting individuals to and from programming. You're leaving more officers exposed when they're still on the cell block. And that's a recipe for really dangerous situations when you combine it with some of the things that Benny was describing earlier. And then on the other side, we have a facilities crisis, because when Mayor de Blasio came into office in 2014, there was a major capital plan on the table to improve conditions at Rikers, and he was for it, but ultimately abandoned it in favor of this ridiculous borough-based jail system. And I think if we had proceeded with that original plan at the outset, we'd be in a much better place than we are today in terms of the material conditions at Rikers.
Coming up, how deep are the challenges? We'll find out when we come back. I think one of the things that I noticed and really kind of got a feel for, and it wasn't the first time I've been on Rikers Island, but it was the first time I got such a comprehensive look inside, is that anywhere an inmate goes, for an inmate to have a medical visit, for an inmate to participate in a program, for any type of thing, it requires at least one correction officer to escort that detainee to that particular function or location. So Benny, in terms of the number of COs, what does that do to what's happening there?
Well, look, I mean, that's historically the department has understaffed us, and they don't account for all the extra posts that are required, like Bimmy was talking about, the programs, right? A lot of inmate programs have been added that require additional officers to work those programs, but they're not accounted for on paper. So we're not hiring the proper staff. And then when you just hire enough and you have to deal with a pandemic, you have to deal with 1,500 officers being assaulted. We visit officers in the hospital with broken eye sockets, broken noses, torn shoulders. The reality is that we have a very dangerous job. And I think when people talk about the sick rate, right, not hiring correction officers in over 3 years, compiled with everything I just said and all the assaults, that decimated us. So we don't have a regular job where if I have a broken eye socket, I'm not coming to work tomorrow. We have hundreds of officers recovering from major injuries. And when you don't have enough officers hired for a backfill, this is what the result is.
And then, Betty, but it's also the issue with the detainees or with the inmates as well, because if they're in some kind of need, there's nobody there, to help them right away because they're busy doing something else. But one of the other things that really surprised me is Commissioner Molina said, he goes, basic security measures were not in place. And one of those, which we saw, was the doors on the jail cells could just be popped open. So not only is that a danger to the officers, but it's a danger to the detainees as well, because how do you want to go to sleep, but if somebody can just pop your door and come in and do something to you, what kind of security is that? Alice, what do you think about that?
I'm not here to get in a fight with Benny or the union about what's happening with staffing there, but and the history of how it is funded. But the simple reality is that, the corrections department has an enormous budget, the vast majority of which goes towards personnel. The ratio of correction officers to incarcerated people in Rikers Island is higher than almost any other jail in the country. And yet the basic services can't be met. And the facilities are falling apart.
Yeah,
like
we
the
saw
fact
that.
Whatever anybody thinks about a jail, the idea that you have jails where the door locks don't work should be a little surprising
It's shocking, and that's it's shocking.
And that's part of it, is that you have facilities that are literally falling apart. You don't have people working on the units literally on the units. The officers are not there. And so when people can come and go and open the doors as they want, and there's nobody there to stop them, there's nobody in control. And somebody has to be in control of these facilities for them to be safe for anybody that is there.
No, absolutely. Bimmy, what about the feeling of safety or unsafety of the detainees? Because when we went into the Peace Center, we saw the music studio, we saw some of the other programs that are there, like the driving simulators and things where people can get certified and get some basic skills. But that was kind of an oasis, and it takes a lot of correction officers in there to keep that atmosphere and to keep that place open and operable for programs like yours. But take us into the mind of one of the detainees. Like, what is it like?
See, I'm gonna talk about experience being there. I probably had one officer there with me. I didn't need no officers. You know what I mean? Because when I walk through the building, they know who I am. So it's like a child. You give him a toy and he don't like that toy, he gonna break that toy. So if you give them something they like, they gonna play. So when I get in the studio and I'm in there, I'm recording with them, or I'm mentoring them, they listening. I tell them, I'm see you tomorrow. If I hear something about you, I'm not bringing you back down here.
David, let me come back to the facilities themselves, because you said that there was this plan that former Mayor de Blasio had. There was something on the table to basically fix the facilities. So there was this whole atmosphere of basically it's every man or every officer, for themselves. What about though, these basic safety measures that are just mind-boggling that you don't have? How do you not have cells that lock?
Yeah, I agree totally with that. Facilities is a major contributor to the dangerousness of the current situation. The commissioner testified, with some tactical searches they've done since February, they've seized over 200 weapons from folks that are there. And I think that we absolutely need a safe, secure facility. And it's not just for the folks that are working there. It's also for the folks who are being detained there, because the reality is, as New Yorkers, and even more so myself as an elected official, we have a duty to provide a humane environment for everyone there. And that means a safe environment. That's essential to that. And pivoting away from fixing Rikers and going to the borough-based jail option has really taken the focus off of making sure that Rikers is habitable for the foreseeable future. Because the truth of the matter is, whether you think Rikers should close or not, and I'm not one of those people, Rikers is a reality now. And you need to provide humane conditions now, as long as it's going to operate. And right now, its operation is essential to the criminal justice system in New York City.
David, as we look forward towards trying to create a situation where, inmates are not choking on oranges, a piece of an orange with nobody there to help them and dying in custody. And these correction officers who are just trying to go to their jobs and are getting these horrific injuries. How much money is necessary, or what are some of the steps? Give us some hope, basically, is what I'm saying. What are some of the steps that need to happen?
Sure. So I think the first thing that needs to happen is the Department of Corrections and OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, need to finish their analysis or reanalysis of what the need actually is at Rikers for staffing, uniform and non-uniform alike, to make sure that we can have a real discussion in the council about the monies that we can allocate for resources at the jail system. The reality is I don't believe that there are enough correction officer positions budgeted at the moment. I think that we're seeing the staffing stretched extremely thin, particularly in relation to the addition of programming over those years, which is very positive for the institution and very positive for the detainees, but it creates taxes on the existing staffing allocations that we have, and it creates unsafe conditions for those working there and for those who are detained there alike.
Alice, in terms of the one other quick thing I want to talk about too, because we're talking about health, physical health, mental health. There's also a very, very light staffing in terms of actual physical and mental health providers on Rikers Island as well. Any concerns about that, or do you think there needs to be more with that as well?
I have concerns about all of it, but I just want to make one point that, seems to be missing here, is that Rikers Island has gotten more expensive every single year. As a city, we are spending over $500,000 per year per person that is housed in that facility. For $500,000.
Alice,
we
I need
need
a breakdown of how they come to that.
From the
Where do they get their number
Alice,
from?
I need a breakdown how they come to that 500,000.
It is all broken. It's all broken down in the controller's report. This is an annual report that they do to assess the total cost, and the controller has the numbers to back it up.
So I think
Who's getting that money, David?
If we are
David, who's getting
spending
that money?
$500,000 as
Somebody
a
give
city per person,
Jesus.
you could put them in the
Alice,
plaza
we have
and
to
give them an assistant.
I'm
It's
not
an
doubt-
insane
I'm not-
amount of
I'm
Let me
not
hear it.
doubting you.
I wanna hear
I'm
it,
not
Alice.
doubting you, but I want to see what kind of math equations they're using, like how they're doing that and where that money is being broken down, like how much
They
is
should
going
be
to
having gourmet
consultants, how much
meals
is
I
if they
going
cost,
encourage
if each of them cost
everyone
$500,000.
get the report. It is a publicly filed report that is written by the city controller, who does an investigation every year and comes up with
All right,
we'll take- we'll
the
take-
math
we'll
is
take-
there, and
What I-
it's
what I-
Take a look at that,
is
but we're running out of time.
unbelievably expensive to kill
No,
people.
I mean,
in
they
this
should be wearing
facility.
Louis.
I've heard
There's-
about
there's-
100,000. Okay, hold on one second. David, Alice, I'm not doubting you. I just want to see how they're compiling that number and where that's coming from, but I would
Read the
love to
report,
get a
please.
copy of that, and we'll take a look at it. David, what about the amount of money that is there for the inmates? Because this is also reminiscent of, the school system too. It's like there's so much money per student, but yet the classrooms are in disrepair. What about the amount of money that's available per inmate? Does that sound realistic?
So I think the biggest drivers of the corrections department budget has been overtime, right? And that goes into the discussion we've been having about staffing. What is the necessary staffing levels? Because when you hire additional staff, you're reducing overtime. So everybody thinks, oh, hiring means that we're increasing the budget. It's not a zero-sum game in that way, where hiring more just means we're going to pay more on top of what we're already paying. There's going to be reductions in overtime as a result of that. And I think that there's always I'm a fiscal conservative, I'm a Republican. I'm always looking at ways that we can reduce waste in government, and no agency is ever going to be exempt from that. But the reality is that when it comes to the big issues that are affecting Rikers, it comes down to facilities and it comes down to staffing. One's a capital budget question, the other is an expense budget question. And we have our capital discussion tied up in the borough-based jail system, which is taking our attention away from fixing real facilities challenges at Rikers that need to be addressed yesterday, not years down the road. And we're never going to get to that point unless we pivot back to the discussion. That's the true reality, which is how do we make Rikers safe for the future?
And that is a question. We're back to where we started. Benny, I'm going to give you the last word on this. What would you like to see happen? I know you want more correction officers, but what would you like to see happen? Because this commissioner says he's met with you several times.
We need 2,500 at the minimum more officers. We need viable consequences for those that are committing crimes in jail, right? A crime is a crime no matter where it's committed.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers from Rikers Island. You can watch it again and share it on our Fox 5 NY YouTube page. Remember, use your mind, it's your best weapon. I'm Lisa Evers. Let's push for peace, love, and justice for all.